This is BSD Now, episode 293, Booking Jails. This is a special episode that we have for you this week because it's an interview with Michael W. Lucas that is, of course, long enough to be its own episode. And we're talking everything about his latest book, about jails, and all other things about writing, book sponsoring, the upcoming BSD Cannes 2019 conference, and more in this week's episode of BSD Now. So we have an interview this week, and he's back in his usual form, Michael W. Lucas. And he just finished his latest book, FreeBSD Mastery Jails, and we definitely want to know everything about it. So welcome back to the show, and congratulations on that latest book.
Thanks.
So, the first question is, how many books did you have to write before you could start on FreeBSD Mastery Jails?
Well, I've got a few here. I thought of this back in 2013, just as soon as I did the ZFS book. Sorry, the OpenBSD book. I said, we need a book on jails. But jails are all about storage. So I wrote a couple books on storage. If you really want to use ZFS, though, or jails, you need ZFS. So I sucked in Alan, and I persuaded him to volunteer and made him think it was his idea. Yeah. Which is, one of the nefarious things I'm most proud of.
And, that was only going to be one book originally, right?
Yes. It's not my fault. You know so much. And jails now with VNet, you really need networking. So you pretty much have to know everything that's in this. And by that time, things like package NG and installation and even syslogd has changed. So pretty much I had to write all of this. So before you start on jails, know this. And then you can really start to leverage them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, if it's needed, then it's good for people to, read them in order.
Well, a lot of people know most of that. And I find that we always have holes in our knowledge. And you don't have to read my particular books. Other people have written books that are perfectly good. Of course, I'd prefer you read mine. But, basically, if you want to make jails do something neat, you have to understand what's behind the scenes in that, whether it be networking or file systems or what have you.
Yeah, we even had some level of that with the ZFS book, where really the question of the order was the hardest thing. It's like, well, to explain this concept, it helps if you already know this concept. But in order to explain that, we should first do this. And then, so it's not like, it'll be like the Tom Clancy books. There'll be like 6 different orders you could read them in for the best result.
Yes. And there were some topics we had to cut into thirds. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you have to know this piece in the beginning, and then we can explain this in the middle. And then at the end, you get this.
Yeah, because if you started with all of it up front, you would lose the reader. But if you saved it all to the end, they wouldn't grasp bits that would help with other bits as they're building up.
Yes. And that's really what tech books are about, is the order in which information is presented. Once you have that, everything else is easy.
Mm. So, but there's also absolute FreeBSD that also was written during that time. So you did some stuff from the jails into that book as well?
Well, there's the jails book is about 7 times as long as the jail information in absolute FreeBSD. Mm-hmm. There's a lot you can do with jails. I mean, jails have been around now for 20 years about. Mm-hmm. So the trick is figuring out what you want to do. And really, just getting a basic jail up and running is easy. But then doing all of the nifty things like base jails and cloning and setting up little virtual networks, that gets complicated really quick.
And it kind of branches out into other parts of the system where, sure, there's all the setup you have to do for the jail, but you also have to configure the base system itself to do stuff for you. If you're going to create jails that don't have regular routable IPs or whatever, then you're going to have to set up some kind of NAT or something, and it gets...
Yes,
so
exactly.
that kind of leads into the next question, is like, how much research did you have to do to be able to write a book about jails?
About 6 years worth. Here's the thing. We have jail started out kind of simple and pretty straightforward. Think back to 98, when PHK first put this jail code in. UFS was the file system. FreeBSD had, basic networking like IP forwarding and such, but bridges weren't really a concern then. Virtual networking was not a thing. This was almost pre-full virtualization. I forget what year VMware came out, let alone QEMU and all the others. But so we started off with, here's this neat thing. People came along and said, oh, cool, I want to do this. And they were, the features of jails kind of followed a clear pattern where people want to do a thing. The thing can't be done. Here's a workaround for the thing. Oh, the workaround is hideous. Here's an official way to do it. Oh, that official way is awful. Here's the proper way to do it. And sometimes that proper way was replaced a couple times. So I went digging through blog posts and news groups and had to check the date on everything, because the knowledge of how to configure jails really is tribal knowledge. And I would find a beautiful looking blog post from 2005 that explained, say, how System 5 IPC is configured. Well, me using docs from 2005 is like someone in the year 2035 trying to use my book to configure a system. That's how far away it is. So it took a lot of careful evaluation of all of the information. And I literally spent years on this.
So it probably doesn't help that, say, the IPC stuff changed like last year, or maybe it was 2017, but I think it was 2018.
I got the System 5 IPC changes. They're in the book.
Yes.
And whoever committed those, I hate you.
But you can run two Postgres servers now.
Yes. And it's a lovely feature. It truly is. But they came out and I went, oh, crap, and frantically rewrote stuff.
Yeah, thanks for invalidating all my research.
Yes. So I dealt with all of that history in the book pretty much by ignoring it. Mm-hmm. There are old ways to configure everything. And people have done some really clever things to make jails work the way they want to. And what I'm really hoping is that people can avoid stumbling on that wonderful blog post from 2005 and instead do the new, easier way.
Yeah, like we kind of touched on it a little bit, but the concept of base jails came about in a time where the 3 or 4 or 500 megabytes of space that a base install of FreeBSD took was a large portion of your hard drive. And so you might not want to have 8 copies of it just because you have 8 jails.
Right. Back in 98, 128 meg was a reasonable amount of memory for a server. Mm-hmm. Today, we won't put up with that on a smartphone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
I think even those thumbnail-sized Raspberry Pis have, a gig of memory? Something like that. So what was impossible back then is routine now. If someone had said back in 98 that we're going to skip System 5 IPC, we're going to create a new System 5 IPC space for every jail just by default. We sysadmins would look at our big hefty servers and their 128 meg of RAM and go, no, don't do this to me, because that was a serious load. Now a server has 128 gig of memory, and nobody cares about wasting a megabyte here and there allocating stuff that might not be used. I mean, part of me rebels at this. I remember compiling kernels on a 486 to save 2.5 meg of RAM.
Yeah, times are changing.
Times are changing. And the truth is, I'm tired of compiling kernels. I don't want to do that anymore.
I've been lucky. I've not had to do that since FreeBSD 8 or so. Everything I've wanted has always been available as a module.
Yes.
Its vimage was the missing bit until recently.
Yes, and vimage was just became default in 12. I kind of waited to release the book until 12 came out, specifically for vimage. And if you're looking at installing a jail host, install 12 or later. Mm-hmm. As vimage changes everything for the better.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people are happy with that.
Yes.
Because even for me, even just having fibs, having multiple routing tables and be able to say, this jail is going to use this other routing table was important, because the default route for the host machine goes directly to the internet. But the jail, it has an internal address and needs to be NATed, and so it needs to go to a different router and have that happen before it goes out to the internet, because the internet will see your 192.168 address and laugh at you.
Yes. Well, and I'm sure that you have, BCP 38 on your network, Alan, and you black hole all of that before it leaves your network, right? Because you are a good and decent sysadmin.
Well, that'd be the network admin job, but yes. We all wear too many hats.
Yes.
Yeah. That's, sometimes it's unavoidable. So we had a little look into the book already, and it talks about something called incomplete jails. And what do you mean by that?
Well, this is something that has been kicking around for a long time. It's had a bunch of different names, and nobody's really formalized it. So I said, what the heck, and I put it in the book because it's incredibly useful. A jail is a collection of namespace transformations. For example, with your file system, you've moved the root directory elsewhere in the file system, and it's a subset of the host. With processes, it's a restricted subset of processes on the host that you see from the jail. With the network, you've stripped down which addresses it can see. And you don't have to perform all of those transformations. I see a lot of people doing a lot of work with jails on a single IP. And they bind the jail to an address on the loopback, and then they use NAT to send traffic to that jail. And they're caging individual services like the web server and whatnot. The thing is, you don't have to transform the IP4 namespace. If you want your web server in a jail and it's just has port 80 and 443, let the jail inherit the whole IP stack. Get rid of that NAT and that part of the firewall. You'll still want a firewall to protect your host, of course. But don't worry about that. You can run a jail without restricting the file system. You can set up a jail whose root directory is the host's actual file system root. And this may seem counterintuitive, but it lets you do things like everything that starts in this jail is part of a single group of processes. And yes, we have Unix process groups, but we still get zombies and weird crap happens. I've run more than one application server. Java applications have been my particular cross to bear. But
oh dear,
many people have their particular hates of some application that starts up 30 processes, and ever so often it goes utterly insane and processes spew out everywhere, and you have to go in and try to kill this thing, and it just won't die. And the host itself is probably sluggish because this application is going amok. By running this process in a jail, you put everything in one bucket, and when it goes insane, you kill the bucket as a whole and everything is dead. There are no zombies, there are no orphans, there's nothing left flailing around looking for its parent. It's truly gone. Solaris has something in C groups that's very similar. And I came across many cases where, in my research, people discovered this and said, wow, this is perfect. But it was it seems to have been independently figured out by many people over the years, and it never really goes anywhere. But this is a powerful tool. If you don't need to have fancy natting to your jail, don't bother setting that up. Complexity breeds downtime. If you don't need to restrict this horrible application to a subset of the file system, don't bother. You just use the jail to hold it and make it one single thing. There's one of the tech reviewers for the book actually took this idea, and he submitted something to jail all FreeBSD services at startup.
Oh, interesting.
So every single daemon gets its own jail. So if anything should go amok, it can be easily managed. And there's some discussion over that. I don't know if it'll even happen. There are probably very good reasons why that won't happen, but it's an interesting idea.
Well, yeah, I remember discussing this idea with John Baldwin and a few other people at a FreeBSD storage summit a couple of years ago, in particular going all the way to the concept of a null jail, a jail with no restrictions at all, and just using it as a container to apply policies to, like CPU set. If you want to make sure that Java program doesn't make the whole server sluggish, it can use all except one of my cores. And maybe the second application can use all but one, but not the same one, so that I have CPU left over to manage the system when these applications go haywire. Or, the resource limit stuff. Make sure that you can... So not have the disadvantage of a jail where, the application has to be able to run without access to the rest of the system. So jail with no restrictions, but then I can apply resource limits to it or just treat it as, this arbitrary group of processes.
Yes, CPU set and resource limits are a beautiful thing. If you haven't looked at them, you really should. I started playing with them and some of them seemed too good to be true. Like you can set how much CPU time a process can use, and I don't know how to guess how much CPU time a process is going to use. I don't know many people who can, but you can also set wall clock time. Say if this runs longer than this time, kill the process. And I of course, tested this by setting a time limit of 30 seconds on PID 1. And it works. It worked perfectly.
Yeah, for a short amount of time.
Yes. I had to boot into single user mode because it was in the startup script. And yeah, don't do that.
Didn't leave you enough time to turn it back off before it rebooted again.
Yes. Or for example, if user BCR has any processes that run longer than 5 minutes, kill them. Like shells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one needs those.
Yeah, no. He's just wasting time.
I think last time I looked at the CPU limiting for actually this process can only use, or this jail can only use 50% of the CPU or whatever, was a bit stuttery or something. You could use up your quota in the first 1/3 of a second and then spend the next 2/3 doing nothing. And at the beginning of the next second, run again.
You are better off using CPU set to limit a jail and let the kernel fight it out. Mm-hmm. And yes, if you really want to go fine-grained and break down how much time in fractions of a CPU a jail can use, or a user or whatever, it can be very herky-jerky. It is no different than limiting the load on a web server by saying it can transmit 1 gig an hour, but it has 20 gigs an hour of requests. Mm-hmm. So choose your headache.
Yeah.
But CPUs are cheap.
Yeah, and you tend to have quite a few of them nowadays compared to,
Yes. Just say this jail may use this CPU and forget it.
This subset of my CPUs, yeah.
Yes. And if you want if you want your standard to be each jail gets a quarter of a CPU, assign 4 jails to each CPU. The kernel will schedule it. It'll handle it.
Yep. So, like you were talking about, as jails kind of have grown over time and the right way to do things has changed as we went from ugly hack to the official way to the user-friendly way. And then, the new official way and then the new user-friendly way. There have been a lot of different jail management frameworks, both classic and current. Why did you choose to write about IOCage for this book?
Well, IOCage sucks less. I tried a bunch of tools. It is ZFS aware, and actually takes pretty sensible advantage of ZFS. And the one feature that really caught my attention was plugins. IOCage plugins are poised to go right up against Docker. You can run a command and IOCage will say, have you ever configured Elasticsearch? It's kind of a pain. But
yeah, you need the right versions, and everything has to fit together, and
Yep. You can run a command and grab an IOCage plugin that is a fully working Elasticsearch server, and it will install it on your host.
Nice.
And that's it. The nice thing is also with their official repository, the plugins have all been fairly sensibly audited. You know how if you download a random Docker container, you may find a bunch of stuff runs as root, and it may have extra services running, and who knows what.
Every one of these Docker containers has the same SSH host key.
Yes. Yes. And the IOCage plugins, as far as I could tell, avoided the really obvious mistakes. I'm not saying they're perfect. There's probably something wrong with some of them, but they take pull requests. You can, of course, download a plugin file and install a plugin from a local file, and what random things you find on the internet are your own responsibility. And the developer, I wound up sending him a few bug reports, and he took them as personal affronts and jumped on them and got them fixed.
That's the best way to handle it.
So that's why IOCage and not any of the other 36 management frameworks.
Yeah, I've been meaning to try it, but I'm still using my same old management framework I've been using for like 10 years now, and I know all of its eccentricities, so it's handy for me. But I generally don't need the advantage I get from the concept of base jails anymore, and I would be fine with just having a data set for each one. Although sometimes it's handy to be able to upgrade 8 jails at once by upgrading one base jail.
Yes, yes. That is the real reason to have base jails now, is for synchronized servers. Although base jails have some... base jails are perhaps the most complex sort of jail you can build. And the one of the big problems I had with them was even the language that we use to talk about them. It makes perfect sense to say something like, my base jail's based on a base jail based in the base. At this point, people are allowed to slap you. Mm-hmm. So I wound up going with origin jails and derived jails as the components of base jails. Mm-hmm. Because we don't need the word base abused any more than it already is.
Yeah.
But then you have things like, how do you handle packages? Are all of your jails really identical in package sets? Because you want some software available everywhere, but then you want to be able to tweak it, and there's a whole variety of ways to choose your pain.
Yeah, it's kind of why I've been working towards a bit more of a way of managing the host OS that's a little closer to the way that I've done jails before, to make it easier to do upgrades. Because the other problem with the base jail concept is that when you upgrade the base jail, there are the bits of the jail that are not part of the base jail that don't get upgraded.
Yes.
I remember when Warren Block wrote the instructions on how to update the etc directory on an easy jail based jail, because the base jail excludes etc, and it gets a bit hairy.
I tell people to just share user source and run merge master. Mm-hmm. There are other ways to do it. There's an infinite number of ways to do this. I mean, I think John Baldwin wrote a 3-way etc merge tool.
Yes, etc update is quite good, but only if you don't have to manage it manually, in particular the updating what the current and the previous original files were. It's handled by the base system as part of upgrading it with FreeBSD update or a source build or whatever, but in the jail, it's not going to be done quite the same way, and it'll get a bit complicated. And the other thing is, it's a tool for merging config files designed for people who normally deal with merge conflicts in SVN all the time, which fits John Baldwin and most of the FreeBSD developers quite well, but doesn't necessarily translate to sysadmins who are like, what have you done to my config files?
Yes. Yeah, I am fond of merge master simply because it's not great, but I know its funny little ways.
Yes. And if you run it with the right flags, it doesn't ask you the silly questions.
Yes.
You don't
Or
end
you
up
put it in the
merging
in the configuration file and get on with your life.
Yep.
But then you don't get to do mergemaster-fu.
FIU. FIU.
Yeah, well.
Well, it's I and then uppercase fu.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to merge the $ FreeBSD lines, which is super helpful.
Yes.
I wish the merging thing in FreeBSD update would learn that particular trick.
Shouldn't be too
Well,
hard.
you know who to yell at for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know exactly what they'll say. Go to it yourself.
You have a commitment, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't got around to trying it yet, but a feature introduced in ZFS a couple years ago allows you to do a ZFS receive to an existing data set, end up creating a new clone. So you normally you create a clone by taking a snapshot of a data set and creating the clone, but they have the way to basically receive as a clone. So you target that same snapshot and receive this data set as a clone. Apparently, what you can do with this is if you have your vanilla installed base system and you've cloned it for your jails, you update the unmodified one and then send the difference to the other ones. And it's supposed to recommonize the blocks that are shared.
Now that would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure which way around you have to do the dance, because I think what you end up doing is sending the changes from the clones back to a snapshot of the original origin data set and creating a new clone and then have to swap them or something. I need to play with it some more and make sure it actually does what I think it does.
Yes, the one thing about using clone jails on FreeBSD is the divergence of the file system.
Yeah.
And if you can reduce that, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And also keep it from overwriting, say, varlog and etc.
Yeah, so you basically take your local modifications and rebase them on a newer snapshot so that you basically recommonize them. I think if you did it that way, I think you'd have to still do the upgrade in each jail and then do the recommonizing. But I'm
Probably.
not sure. Yeah.
And that would save space, or you could just use thick jails and avoid the whole problem.
Yes, because in the end, once you compress it, a FreeBSD jail is only going to take a few hundred megabytes.
Right, and
it's not really worth spending a lot of effort.
One thing I've really learned in this is file system complexity is directly proportional to downtime. The fancier you get, the more things go wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
You should see my jail that has 200 something ZFS datasets delegated into it.
No, I really shouldn't see that.
Well, see, we put the customers in a jail so that they don't touch the machine. And each customer has their own data set because otherwise you can't delete a snapshot or we can't get the space back without deleting the snapshot for everyone instead of only the one person.
Yeah, of course.
Speaking of too many things, how many jails do you run yourself?
Well, I counted before this talk, thinking I've only got a couple. And no, I have 26.
Oh, that's not bad. And it shows the practice that, I need to run a new service. Let's put it in a jail right from the beginning.
Jail all the things. I mean, you can, most of my servers now are virtual. And you get, half a terabyte of disk and 4 processors and 4 gig of RAM for $40 a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty cheap.
There's no reason not to use a jail. And it's slightly more annoying to set up, but it saves so much trouble. If one of my applications, say, my go-to example in this is, PHP 5.6 versus PHP 7.2. 5.6 just went end of life, and I truly hope one day to have the time to stop using it. But I don't want those to conflict. I don't want the packages to conflict. Just jail it all and move one service at a time. Not everything is a giant monolithic whole.
Well, wasn't running 2 versions of PHP concurrently the original very first use case of jails?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure the web hosting company that paid PHK to do it was specifically to use it as their migration mechanism to have PHP X running over here and PHP Y running over here on the same machine without making them fight each other.
I would not be surprised, because if you set aside all of the security stuff about jails, and just what are they from a sysadmin perspective, they are a way to make lumps of software, self-contained lumps that you deal with as individual lumps that do not touch the rest of the system. Your only real issue is the jail operating system version cannot be newer than the host. You have to upgrade the host first. I mean, I have run FreeBSD 4 systems jailed in FreeBSD 10. That was a server that at my last job, a mission critical application had somehow been installed on a converted desktop. It was running FreeBSD 4.10 and had like PHP 2 and MySQL 1.5, and it was running IPF, because that was the firewall back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I looked at this and said, oh my God, if this machine dies, we're all doomed. We had a second identical desktop, but getting FreeBSD 4.10 on a server is not what I want to do. So I tarted up, jailed it. It ran just fine. Apparently, you can run even older FreeBSD in a jail. You need a custom kernel that supports A.out binaries. And if you need to jail some application running FreeBSD, running on, say, 2.2 or something, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider your business strategy.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's someone doing it, and I'm sure that person would really love to take my advice. And I will believe them when they say they're stuck.
Yeah.
But
I had a FreeBSD 7 point something jail still running on a FreeBSD 11.1 machine until we finally managed to basically rebuild the application so it would work on modern system.
Yeah, you use the host to protect the jail. Use a modern firewall. That kind of thing. That sort of operation is not about restoring the server as a functional server. You throw away the jail's SSH daemon and its firewall, and you use the host services. It's all about bringing up the app and allowing that app to run in the smallest possible space with the smallest exposure to anything, because it's still PHP 2 and MySQL 1.5 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But about the other half of the times, I use jails exactly the opposite, to protect my host system from whatever crap I'm going to do in the jail.
Oh yes.
Like when I need to install some packages or try something, give me a fresh jail. It's faster than spinning up a VM, and it's cleaner, and it's faster, and I can throw it away when I'm done.
And the load, the resource requirements for a jail are minuscule.
Yeah.
You
Nothing.
start an empty jail, and what kind of resources does it need? It needs disk space. Well, practically these days, as far as operating system installs go, disk space is infinite. Walk over to the computer store, there's a 10 terabyte hard drive for $99. Disk space is infinite. A jail on its own starts 3 processes: cron, syslog, and the send mail submit that will forward email to whoever's supposed to get. That's nothing. Jails are, I jail every single service.
Because the other reason I do that is, I have a bunch of servers, and now I need to take one of them down for maintenance to do something to it. I'm going to replace the network card with the 10 gig card or something. Well, I can snapshot the jail, replicate that to the other host, then do an incremental if it took too long. Then I stop the jail, one more snapshot, replicate that, and then start the jail on the other machine, and with basically a minute of downtime, move all the applications to a different machine, such that I can then power off the first machine with no interruption.
Yep. And that's one nice thing IOCage does for you. It has an import-export function that bundles up the jail as a thing, and then you just copy it over and import it. You have to do the final sync manually from a snapshot, of course, but
Yeah.
Yes, jail all the things.
I saw a very interesting talk at Asia BSDCon a couple weeks ago, where they ported the Run C container framework stuff to work on FreeBSD with jails, such that they could migrate a Docker container from Linux to FreeBSD and have the processes start up again and run.
Ooh.
Like it migrates the contents of the TCP socket buffer and keeps the connections you had open. It's not actually live migration, it's pause migration, but pause migration can be of jails between FreeBSD machines or between operating systems even.
Well, yeah, or it's even migration in the first place from Docker into jails. Some people want to get rid of Dockers.
Both of them, it's just run C. So you can use Docker as a front end to that, but it's not Docker specific, really.
We live in an age of miracles.
Yeah,
that
made by computers. Cool. Very much so, yeah. Interesting prospects.
Somebody's university research project on the concept of, you can never trust any one operating system not to have a critical bug in it. So if you have 2 different operating systems and you can ping pong your work between them based, when something goes wrong, then that's a very useful feature.
It is.
And we see a number of places that use FreeBSD specifically for that. Like VeriSign runs the .com and .net root level domains, and they run it on half Linux and half FreeBSD specifically for that purpose.
My last job, we specifically had OS diversity and vendor diversity. No single component was all from one vendor.
Yep.
And we had border attacks that knocked down all the Cisco routers, but the MikroTik stuff stayed up. It never happened the other way around. Kind of weird that. But, it's theoretically possible. It could happen. So, yes, it's all wakeful.
So shifting gears a little bit,
sure.
Tell us how how the book sponsorship stuff went with the Jails book and how you're planning to do things going forward.
Well, this was the most sponsored book I've ever done. There were 27 print sponsors.
Ooh.
And I forget, there was, all told, 127 people backed this book before it was released, which is just amazing. I think part of that was because the sponsorship was open so long and people kind of stumbled across it. I'm sorry, 123 backers.
Oh, wow. We've
So
come a long way.
that's huge. These
Yeah.
people, they overpaid me for the book before it even came out. And when I first tried this with the Advanced ZFS book, I thought it was a stupid idea. There's no way anyone would do this. And several people did, and the money came in at the same day that my water heater exploded. So the sponsorship fixed the hot water heater, and I took that as a sign that maybe I should keep doing this. And I am astonished and grateful. Many of the sponsors even ask me to tell them when the next sponsorship happens because they want to back it. And I have the best intentions. I keep those emails in my inbox so I see them and don't forget them. My inbox, of course, is an unspeakable black hole. They just photographed one of those today. It looks exactly like my inbox. So I've started a mailing list that if you want to know about the sponsorship, you can sign up for the mailing list and I will tell you when they are available. Because I've been posting these on Twitter and on my blog, and the problem with that is, busy people don't sit around reading my blog. People who have a lot of money are generally busy. And it's much better for me if I can just tell them to give me money.
Oh, yeah.
A
Easy
surprising
solution.
few of them do, and I love every one of them. So that I just got today the copies for the print sponsors, and they are all getting hardcovers.
Ooh.
They get their name in the book.
Very
So,
nice.
there's a page and a half of them. The dust cover, there's no text on it. You get just the art.
Nice.
So, I do have to put the name on the cover, so it's on the dust jacket, but I can put it on the inside. So print sponsors are going to get a nice, useful, blunt instrument that's allowed in the office.
Yeah, well hidden. Okay, I think that will make more people attracted to sponsoring future books. We'll see. So what other books, fiction or nonfiction, are you currently working on?
Well, my writing schedule has been in kind of a mess. I've been slowed down the last couple of years. It turns out my thyroid was bad. I got my throat cut, and life is so much better. I'm trying to pull my schedule back in, and get it organized. So I'm working on I have 4 half-finished novels. I'm buckling down in the next couple of weeks to finish just one of them. Because, anytime you have a project and it's interrupted repeatedly, you start to build up a dread of that project.
Mm-hmm.
And really the only thing for it is just to shut up, buckle down, and do it. So finish a novel in the next couple of weeks, and that'll be Terrapin Sky Tango, the sequel to Butterfly Stomp Waltz. And then I'm diving in on a second edition of Pseudo Mastery. That one's up for sponsorship now, by the way.
Hint,
I'm
hint.
supposed to shill those things in this interview. It's practice for my inevitable interview on Fox News or ABC or whatever.
It's the next thing that comes after you.
Next thing that comes up. So, new Pseudo Mastery. Pseudo has actually changed some in the last 6 years.
They all grow up so fast. Yep.
They grow up so fast, but I have I have some fun cover art planned for that. God help me, it will be dogs playing poker with BSD Ux and the Minix raccoon and some others. So, that, and after that, I'm going to have to see. I'm still dragging the schedule to get back together, and I don't want to be too ambitious because I'll just disappoint myself. I mean, logically, I should write 2 novels and a tech book every month.
Yeah. First, you have to get back on track, and then you can figure out what's next. So I'm not asking.
I don't remember how long it took us to write the 2 ZFS books, but it was a while.
It was.
And definitely the second one, a lot of that was on me.
Well, I wasn't going to say that on camera, but since you brought it up, yes.
Anything about Git Sync murder?
That's on the list. It's one of the 4. People keep asking for a sequel to Git Commit Murder, and it will happen, but I don't know when.
Okay, then we'll wait.
At this point, you just have to make sure it's ready in time for BSDCan 2020. So you got some schedules.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan.
No pressure.
You have plenty of time this way.
Yes.
And also, with the BSD cans in between, you get a lot more inspiration from the things that are happening there. Perhaps.
We'll have to see what I do and where it's set and all of that.
All right. Yes, I think originally it wasn't. It was set somewhere more like a PenguinCon or something, wasn't it?
I'm kind of looking at a con that bears a suspicious resemblance to PenguinCon. I'm going to have like 10 talks there this year, mostly panels, because panels are easy. I wind up other people and make them babble. Yeah. But we'll be doing the JS talk. Yeah.
We've never managed to get panels really going at BSDCan. We should try that next year.
Well, we've talked about it. If we had to fill in gaps in the schedule, we would certainly do a panel. But the BSDCan schedule is pretty full of pretty awesome talks. I mean, we had to add a 4th room. And
yes.
I wouldn't change that, though. So, yeah, I see what you're saying.
We have all the BOFs during lunch. I think I am, after years of asking, I'm thinking Friday night I will finally do the gelato crawl for those who think they're brave enough. Come on.
Yeah, it's becoming a tradition, yeah.
Yes,
so we might as well make it official.
Absolutely. But, there are like 5 little gelato shops in the market. And you know how a pub crawl, you get a beer at each and keep going? Well, we should do the same thing with the gelato run.
By all means, yeah.
Oh, yeah, BSDCan should be pretty good this year. We have some wonderful talks.
Well, yes, actually, the next question is, what are you most looking forward to at the upcoming BSDCan?
What I'm most looking forward to really is just talking to the people, getting the insights. I mean, if something happens, if I get in a conversation with, Peter Wem or Bob Beck about what's really going on, I'm going to stay in that conversation and miss the talk. I'm sorry, but the things I'm really looking forward to, there's a talk on accessible OpenBSD that I really want to see. We at Semibug, maybe a year ago, we had a speaker who was blind give a talk on Dragonfly BSD for the blind and how he found that much more usable than the Ubuntu for the blind. So, and all the things he had to do to make it actually work for him. which was very cool. And I want to see what OpenBSD does there.
Yeah, there's a user that comes to meet BSD most times that's blind as well, and he was saying that most of it's pretty usable once you get the serial console stuff set up, but it's weird to have find someone that you can walk through doing the install when you've never seen the install.
Yes,
to get them to do the initial setup so that he can then take over and use the machine.
And apparently Dragonfly is really easy for that. So I thought that was cool. Your open ZFS talk, because there's a lot of scuttlebutt going around, and I'm just going to sit there for an hour and let you do all the research for me.
Well, the idea with that talk is that Matt Aarons will do half the work, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the important part of that is the person doing the work is not me.
Yes.
So I'll take some notes and keep them for if we do some more ZFS books.
Yeah, that was a question that came into the show a couple weeks ago. Is when is the next one? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, we can talk about that. There's a whole bunch that goes into when do new editions come out. Mm-hmm. And it's has the technology changed enough? Will the market sustain it? Like my DNSSEC book is old and a little dated, but I don't know that the market will sustain a new edition.
Mm-hmm. And because with the ZFS one, it even raises the question of, do you drop the FreeBSD out of the title and make it just about ZFS in general?
We really could. And that's one of the things to think about. Although I really like the cover art.
Yes.
So we'd probably recycle that no matter what.
For sure.
So there is the FreeBSD for the Linux user talk I want to see, because it's important to listen to people. Mm-hmm. Come and try to use your tools and your software. I mean, I have used MergeMaster for so long, my brain is not really involved.
Right. I've used it for so long. I used it over dial-up where I was typing ahead of what I could see on the screen.
Yes.
And was like merging the next file while it hadn't even drawn yet.
Yes.
That's not an experience new users are likely to have had.
No.
And
and the Road Warrior desktop recovery is a subject near to my heart. I mean, I've been very fortunate when traveling that I've never had a laptop blow up. But then I look at someone like Warner Losh, who has lost 4 laptops at BSD Can. And I want to be prepared. So don't be Warner.
EuroBSDCon in Sweden, in the lecture hall, they had the seats had these weird fold-out table things. But they were counterweighted weirdly. So if you put your laptop too far back on it and open it up, it would close and drop your laptop on the floor.
I see no way this could go wrong.
At least 8 laptops got dropped badly. Dan's Mac, the screen got all spider-webbed, and it was not fun.
No.
Luckily, my laptop consists of a ZFS send of my workstation the day before I leave for the conference, and then I do the stuff, and then I send it back when I go home.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Backups, yeah.
But
it's less about backups and more about taking my work with me, but yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the goat boff.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The goat boff.
Funny you should mention the little guy.
Oh, I'm sure he doesn't want to talk to me.
No, he's not in talking mood. Yeah. There's therapy planned for that, for the goat.
That's probably best.
We'll send you the bill then.
Go right ahead. This is the United States. We don't pay medical bills here. We just have them and go bankrupt.
Yes. Yeah, remember that. Small details.
Yes.
Well, the goat was born in Canada, right? Maybe it gets...
Oh. Yeah, I would hope so for his sake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But yeah, I would like to see more like new user talks or something at BST. And the other idea I had was when I used to do the sysadmin podcast, the most popular segment was always war stories.
Yes, we try to
wondering if we
always
could-
have some war stories.
Yeah, I was thinking if we could actually do something maybe at lunchtime, kind of like the BOFs, but as the lightning talks, kind of like the work in progress session you've done a couple times. But you'd probably need to be a little more curated because people are going to have rehearsed their war story in order to fit it into 5 minutes or something. But having a series of those could be quite entertaining.
They really can. The problem is we get so many good talks.
Yeah.
We accept most of what we get. I published a few years ago a blog post on why we reject BSD CAN talks.
Yes, we pointed people to that during the call for papers every year because it's very good. It answers the questions what you should include and also gives kind of examples of what's enough and what's not enough.
The problem is that's made it much harder to go through and reject papers.
Yes, because they all meet the minimum now.
Yes, they all meet the minimum, and so we have to do some digging. And there have been people who we never would have considered in previous years who started submitting great proposals, and it turns out they're wonderful speakers. Mm-hmm. They just didn't know how to write a proposal. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're going to have that blank time in the foreseeable future. If we get a sudden surprise, I think a panel would be great. War stories would be great. I'm doing a talk this year. Actually, I'm chairing a panel at PenguinCon for senior sysadmins, people who've been sysadmins for 20 years or more. And we're talking ethics this year, which should be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It's an important topic. Yeah.
That one would even be useful to then take the results of the panel and distill it down into a regular talk to give at BSD CAN or something.
No comment. That could even be a book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Someone needs to be recording the whole thing and mine it for ideas. Yeah.
I remember we actually had an ethics class in our network engineering and sysadmin course, although it was a little slapdash, but.
Well, it's a topic that we talk about a little bit, and mostly we talk about our failures. I mean, I remember way back in the day when I realized that I could read all the files in var mail.
Yeah, that was like the first most important thing in our ethics class is like, you're going to have access to the email server. You should not read other people's email.
Yes.
That's not okay. Yes.
And then you get that one corrupt mail. That means you have to go in with VI and remove one line from a mail, and you're scrolling through God knows what that they receive.
Or use Maildir. Maildir. Every email should be a separate file.
It really should, but it's not by default. One of you committers should fix that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not touching send mail. Just use postfix, devcut, and say Maildir. Problem solved.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, I expect we'll be seeing postfix integrated into FreeBSD base soon then.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well,
you can use an IO cage pre-built thing.
Uh-huh.
Splat, and you'll have a mail server.
Sure you can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Another venue where this could be discussed is BSD user group in a more regular way than just a conference. How is your user group going?
Our user group is pretty good. I did a dry run last night on the Jails talk.
Good.
Because I take the heckling from the audience and incorporate it into the talk.
Yeah, that's an important function of the things like BSD user groups that about 5 years ago, when they were kind of almost all dwindled out, it was something we felt we were kind of missing, is somewhere for people to develop and practice talks in a bit more than doing it in the mirror, but less than doing it in front of 300 people.
Yes, that's one of the reasons we do not film our talks. It's not just so I can test slides and get free proofreading. We want people who have never given a talk to show slides in front of a dozen or 24 people and talk through it and learn that they can do this. So, and we then encourage them to go submit these BSD talks to actual conferences. Mm-hmm. So our user group is going okay. I'm expecting it to be a little quieter over the summer because people travel and such, but we have a talk next month on Asterisk on FreeBSD. Mm-hmm. We had a talk last month on the history of OpenBSD from Nick Holland, who was the OpenBSD FAQ maintainer since IPF was in OpenBSD base. That long time. So, and we are nurturing the newer committers, mostly either ports for FreeBSD, although one guy is working on the ARM32 port for OpenBSD. So, and he is right at the edge of getting a commit bid, I hear. So, these little groups matter a lot. And if you open one, if you start one locally and you meet at the same place at the same time every month, people will show. Create a Google Calendar that's open to the public that just says the third Tuesday of every month, we meet at wherever. And people will start to show up. I'm surprised at how many BSD people are in Detroit.
Yeah, they come out of their holes when they see that there's such an event.
They do. And they like to hang out with their people. Now, if I could just get Joe to submit his paper or his talk on using Android without Google to one of the BSD conferences, I'd be happy. But he's difficult.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we let you out of your interview jail?
I have books. You should buy them. The rats need snacks.
Have you ever thought of selling just the cover art as like posters?
I have considered it. It's on my copious free time list. Mm-hmm. The truth is, I would rather spend my time writing than merchandising.
Right. Makes total sense. We would rather that as well, actually. Yeah.
The writing is what I love to do. I do little things on the side as they amuse me. I mean, that's why I started doing the hardcovers. Because I said, that's kind of cool. I can do this now. Mm-hmm. And I did the SSH one just to learn how to do hardcovers before I actually needed it. And to my surprise, people bought them. And that let me do some kind of fun things. Actually, if you've seen the Relay D book that has the wraparound cover in the paperback, but I'm going to step off camera for just a sec.
Yep.
I was looking at this just off of camera range. This is the hardcover, and it has just the art. There's no text.
Mm-hmm.
Except when you open it up and it's clearly labeled the gratuitously expensive hardcover version, because these are. I wish they were cheaper. They're not cheap to make yet. And all that price gets passed on directly to you. I don't make any extra on those. But the second edition pseudo book is designed with art specifically for wraparound dust jackets. So you'll get a piece of it on the ebook, most of it in paperback, and then people who are interested enough to buy the hardback, the art continues in the front flap. So this is how I amuse myself.
So there might be an extra character that only makes an appearance in the extended cut, basically?
Sort of. Mm-hmm. It works for Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well. Or you just buy 2 books, one for the hardcover to put on your, on the wall, and then the other one to read it.
I'm halfway expecting someone to frame the puffy art.
Yeah.
As
why not?
The open BSD fans are kind of intense. So
but so yeah, I wouldn't dog ear my hardcover copy.
No, paperback. Yeah, do whatever. So, no, that's about it. I have no. I'm still writing books.
That's good. That's what we want to hear and see.
Please help support my vermin.
Mm-hmm. And of course, jail early, jail often.
Yes. Oh, I forgot one thing I'm working on now. At BSD Can, I expect to have a special edition of the Jails book for auction. Mm-hmm. You remember, Alan, you got the French version of ZFS?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Did you ever find out what was different in that?
No, I've not. It's on my copious free time list.
Okay. Well, it's been years, so I'm just going to tell you.
Thank you.
There's the place where we had the argument in footnotes. Mm-hmm. Where we stacked like 4 or 5 of them in a row yelling at each other. I finally have the last word in that argument. So,
I'm gonna have to go find that after dinner.
So I'm doing a bail bond denied version of the Jails book.
Ooh, nice.
Where it has the cover art that I would use if I was trapped in jail and could not afford a real artist.
Did I see a preview of that on Twitter somewhere, I think?
Yes. I cannot draw. I bought some oil pastels because they scan well. And I am attempting to create cover art that will go on a real book.
Ooh, exciting.
So you will, only 5 of that will exist, as usual, and you'll get the opportunity to bid on that and the original art in the most cheap and gaudy frame I can find. So, and the proceeds will go to the BSD Can charity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for a good cause.
So that really is all.
All right, then.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, again for yet another great interview.
Thank you.
And good luck with your writing.
Thanks. Keep up the podcast. We all watch it.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we're already into it for so many hours, and you might as well continue.
293 weeks in a row, we've never not had an episode.
I am impressed. I don't think I've managed to do anything 293 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
My
not-
streaks actually extends back into the previous show. So
Yes.
I think
But
Was
no
it
one has ever
2011?
counted the number of words we speak on the show. So
well, the words no. I did at one point make a playlist of all the episodes of TechSnap, and it was hundreds of hours.
yeah.
It's like so much of my time, but then you multiply by the number of people who've watched, and I was like, I wasted so many people's time.
Well, I don't think it's a waste.
Yep.
You know, the rest of our lives are less interesting than your podcast.
If you put it that way, yeah, then it's kind of uplifting this way.
You-
Yeah.
You bring joy to people.
And I mean, that's the news every week. It's like watching the real news on TV, and you get some
it's better than
information
that.
here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But definitely better. But you get some information here that you don't get in other places, or sometimes earlier than at the next conference. And so that's interesting. And also the interviews that makes it special.
Yes, you perform a service. Keep it up. And
Yeah.
thank you.
You too.